2 years ago, Ontario's New Democratic Party said Black community members should see themselves represented and respected when they look at their government. Black Canadian leaders must be at the table when every decision is made. And with that, they created the first ever Black Caucus at Queen's Park. It's a milestone, but also underscores the relatively small number of Black Ontarians who've been sent to the Pink Palace. With us now to reflect on their experiences and, unlike our regular custom, where we normally introduce our guests from furthest away to closest to our studio, I think protocol dictates this time that we go in order of experience, starting in Scarborough, Ontario, with Alvin Curling, who in 1985 became the first ever Black cabinet minister in Ontario history. He's also a former Speaker of the Legislature. In Forest Hill, in the capital city, there is Zinena Akande, who in 1990 became the first ever Black female MPP and cabinet minister in Ontario history. And we also welcome two members of the current NDP caucus. In her riding of Kitchener Centre, Laura May Lindo, and in her riding of Toronto St. Paul's, Jill Andrew. They are both founding members of the NDP's Black Caucus, and we welcome all four of you to TVO tonight for, I would suggest, an important and perhaps a bit of a nostalgic discussion as well about time at the Pink Palace. And as we start this, let's just put your political participation into some kind of perspective here. And with that, I'll ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, to bring up this graphic, because you follow in the footsteps of a very important person. The first Black Ontario MPP ever elected was in 1963. That was Leonard Austin Braithwaite, represented Etobicoke in the Ontario Legislature. And it would, of course, be more than 20 years later before the first Black Ontario cabinet minister was named. That was the aforementioned Alvin Curling in 1985. There's been a total of 14 MPPs elected to office who identify themselves as Black. Only 14 since Confederation. And there are currently 7 Black members in the legislature today, 5 New Democrats, 2 Liberals. All right, let's get into some background here. Many of you were asked, I think probably in some cases numerous times, to get into provincial politics. And I want to know, given how rare Black political participation is at Queen's Park, I want to get a better understanding of what finally got you to yes. Alvin Curling, why did you finally say yes?
That's a very direct question. The fact is that in 1985, when I was asked to participate, I think that the Liberals were having quite a lot of challenge anyhow of getting anyone to run with this blue machine, the incumbent being Tom Wells, to represent Scarborough.
You're referring to the fact that the Conservatives had been in power for 42 straight years in 1985.
That's right. For 42 years of ruling as the Conservative, what they call the Blue Machines with Bill Davis, Scarborough was known as the Conservative bastion of the political situation in the province. And so therefore, to get a Liberal to run in that riding was quite challenging. And I was asked, as a matter of fact, just give you a perspective of it all. There was 410 polls in that riding, and 82, the Liberal had won only 1 poll. So therefore, when I was asked, I presume they were seeking someone to do it, so forth. So I stepped forward and we ran for the nomination unopposed and got the nomination then.
And of course, won on election day. Now let me take Zinena Akande to 1990. The New Democrats had never won the riding that you contested in 1990. So what made you say yes?
Well, I looked at the platform. I had been asked before, but I looked at the platform and to see whether, in fact, I was eager to go out and campaign for myself on those issues. I had campaigned for many other candidates in their election. And I saw 3 things that interested me and that I was willing to speak to. Long-term care, because old women are poor women, stepping in and out of the workforce for various reasons. Combined services for children, especially since Black children and many other poor children were having difficulties with the school system and with the kind of instruction they were receiving. And then employment equity. And those three things influenced me. And I thought these are issues that I can speak to, that I'm interested in, that I'm focused around, and I'm willing to go out and campaign for that.
Laura May Lindo, I'm going to ask you the same question, but put a little tweak on the end of it. And that tweak is, your uncle is Alvin Curling. So I'm wondering how influential he was in your decision to run.
So thank you for that. And thank you for having this opportunity to be with Uncle Alvin today. It never occurred to me that I couldn't win, but politics was never something that I had thought about doing. I was actually asked by MPP Catherine Fife in Waterloo, who met me when I mounted a summit into the status of race and racism on Canadian university campuses. And actually, Uncle Alvin was kind enough to come out my way to Waterloo Region and be part of the hosting of that summit. After it was done, it was actually Catherine Fife who pulled me aside and asked me a number of times if I would consider running. And what got me to finally say yes, because I did say no repeatedly, what got me to finally say yes was when she said to me, imagine if you had a broader platform to do the racial justice work that you'd want to do in post-secondary. And at one point, I had to sit down with that and make a decision about whether or not I was going to walk the talk or just sort of stay within that one sphere that I was already in, knowing that there would be limitations to how far that advocacy.
Gotcha. Catherine Fife, of course, being the current member for the NDP for Waterloo. Now, Jill Andrew, as I ask you the same question, we should point on the record, there has never been a person of color who represented St. Paul's in the past, and the NDP had also never won St. Paul's before you. So what got you to say yes?
Well, first of all, I was asked, and I was asked a few times. But what got me to say yes, having worked in education for several years, I had seen the disproportionate impact of racism, of discrimination felt by Black youth, Indigenous youth, youth of color, queer youth. And as I thought about it more and more and more, I realized that politics could be a platform for me to fight against anti-Black racism, against homophobia and transphobia, and all the things that had plagued so many students that I had worked with over the years. So for me, education was a very seminal reason for why I said yes. And also even healthcare, too. I had experienced some pretty, egregious experiences in healthcare, and for me, it was important to be at a table where I could help change policy, where I could help change minds, and make, our institutions more equitable and inclusive for Black and racialized people across Ontario.
Now, we're just actually a few days past the actual second anniversary of the creation of the Black Caucus by the New Democrats at Queen's Park. And Laura May, let me get you back in here on this. Just give us some better understanding of why you thought there would be value in the creation of a so-called Black Caucus in the NDP party at Queen's Park. What did you hope it could achieve?
So I think I have to answer that and take it a step back, because it wasn't actually the NDP that decided to form the Black Caucus. It was that we had a community meeting with Black leaders. Zinena Akande actually was with us on that day. And a number of people at that table were shocked that there were that many Black people in one party at that one time. And in that moment, a number of people kept saying, wow, it would be kind of neat if there was a Black Caucus. Wow, it would be really interesting to figure out how could you use this moment in history to do something to advance the needs and supports and advocacy for Black communities. And I actually remember Zinena at the very end sort of whispering in my ear, it would be kind of cool to have a Black Caucus, wouldn't it? And so we brought all of this We brought all of the information back to the leader of the official opposition, to Andrea Horwath. And I remember Andrea pulling me aside at one point before the actual decision was made. And she said to me, over the years, I've done a lot of work with Black communities. There's always sort of steps and ideas that we have on ways to structure supports for them, and rarely do they work in making real change. So I don't want to go this step unless there's a commitment that we're actually going to do the work. And so for me, that became a moment where I thought, okay, the Black Caucus can actually do something real. Then I too would like to be part of the formation of the Black Caucus.
Yeah, let me
So
find out.
thing.
Let me find out more about that from Zanina Akande. What tangible things did you think the creation of a Black Caucus at Queen's Park could actually achieve?
I thought that it would be a collective voice speaking to effect the changes that were necessary for our communities. I remember way back when I was in government and I was determined to get employment equity passed. I had to go and solicit among those within my party, none of whom were Black, to get support of 9 people to focus our whole attention on getting the caucus to support us in bringing that to the table. It was not easy. And because I was one voice, actually 2, because Gary Malkowski was there too, speaking to encourage all the others, even though we were the majority at that time. And so I thought how much easier that would be to have a group, a Black Caucus, to help to move the whole agenda along, and also to look at each issue from our point of view, to see, in fact, if we were omitted almost without having been considered. That would be extremely important, and I'm sure they'll do it. Gary
Malkowski, if I recall, was the first ever deaf MPP in the Ontario Legislature, and had somebody on the floor with him who would sign his questions and answers during question period. Alvin Curling, I'd like your view on the creation of this Black Caucus and whether you think it's a good idea.
Well, let's say this. Let me take some of the glory out of Laura May. When Zanina Akande was there and doing our project, we had a Black Caucus. They named Alvin Curling and Zanina Akande, but we didn't meet. We met in mind, and it was kind of, as Zanina remember, putting our bills through, how strategic it was, and I wasn't even the critic, but I was asked to respond to some of the issues that of the day. And it was sort of rather skillful. And I want to say, let me commend Zanina Akande for this, because I want to be forceful in a certain political way, but it wasn't working politically. But it was more as a social conscious move we have to make. And so when this is formed, I said, well, here we go. It doesn't matter, just like you asked the question before, but as long as we can focus on the issue, it doesn't matter what party it was. So I was delighted to hear that.
All right, let me follow up with Jill Andrew on that. The idea of creating the Black Caucus, we have some understanding of that right now, but let's find out, when the rubber actually hit the road, what you think it's been able to achieve over the past 2 years.
Thank you, Steve. I certainly think that we have worked hard to continue building trust in Black communities across Ontario, and that we have done that through several consultations on key issues impacting our community, everything from arts and culture to education to jobs and employment to the justice system, quote unquote, to the healthcare system, to housing. We have spoken with Black Ontarians to get their voice and to hear their voice, and to have that considered in every piece of legislation that we have certainly as NDP put forth. Something else that we achieved that is very, very near and dear to my heart is we have brought hundreds of Black youth, of racialized youth, to Queen's Park to literally walk in that building and to take stock of who's on the walls and who's not on the walls, who's in the seats and who's not in the seats, so they can recognize that Queen's Park is their house and that they too can one day be elected officials and create change in their community.
Well, because he was a Speaker of the Legislature, there is a portrait of Alvin Curling at Queen's Park. So he's one of the guys on the walls. And I do want to pick up with Alvin Curling here because, Mr. Curling, you may not remember this, but I remember it very well. More than 20 years ago, you and I had a conversation for, I think, the first book I ever wrote, at which time you told me that for probably the first 6 months that you showed up to work at Queen's Park every day when you were first elected in 1985, you had an absolutely blasting headache because you felt so much pressure as the first ever Black cabinet minister not to let down the side. And I wonder if you could just sort of go into that a little bit right now and tell us why you felt so much pressure not to disappoint.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for that question. It's a very intriguing question, because the fact is that representation, that the Black community was so delighted that a Black was there, but also the Chinese and the First Nation, the Indians, Asian people, saw me as their individual who represent their cause. So I had to almost try to represent all those groups, and I was the only one. And the pressure was, how much time can I put into this situation? And not only within the situation of Scarborough North or Scarborough Roots River at the time. The fact is that we had people from all over, from Windsor, whatever, were seeing me to come to their functions and their issues. And the demand was extremely difficult because I was representing, let's say, Ontario, so to speak. I was going to Sudbury, all over the place. And Zanina can identify with that in 87 too. She was called beyond that. So the challenges and the headaches were there. And I hope I do not let them down. I hope that I can articulate their issues, and I seek their help in this regard. And I want to say to you that it is those individuals out there who advances those issues and were kind enough, I would say kind enough, to be patient for as I put forward these issues itself, and hope that the party, regardless of who it was, accept some of the concerns that we had and acted upon them.
And Zanina Akande, I'll ask you the follow-up question, which is when you got elected in 1990 and you walked into the legislature, there was you and there was Alvin Curling, and that was it. There was 128 other members in there who didn't look like you. What was that like?
Well, it's like living in Toronto. Remember, I was raised here, and so I'm accustomed to being, in an other majority population, and it was like that. But there were all eyes on us. I remember I gave the high sign to Alvin, and it was like everybody looked. They asked very strange questions. Some of them, in trying to be friendly, were absolutely hysterical, if not obnoxious.
Go ahead, give us an example.
I was asked, for example, if I bought that suit instead of a car because of the way I dressed, or why I was driving a certain kind of car. I won't give Volvo the big introduction, which was standardized. I mean, it's things that had absolutely nothing to do with politics, and I was rather disappointed, because I thought, now here I'm going to be sitting with people who are really focused on the issues that affect our lives, the finance, the education, the social services. I was excited and I was prepared. I read everything that I could read, and yet the conversation was quite different from that. And I realized that, all the intelligence isn't existing in this room.
Laura May Lindo, that was, we should point out, 3 decades ago. And I think the assumption today is that things are better in our provincial seat of government today. Are they?
That's a good question. I think things are different. We've had the rise of Black Lives Matter, solidarity marches all across the province, which means that there was broader attention to the kinds of issues impacting Black communities when I was elected and when Jill was elected. There's been a shift in the kinds of debates, the kinds of conversations that are happening in the chamber. I've had veteran members that have come up to me and said that they have never had this level of extensive discussion about Black communities in everything that they're doing. And part of that is a nod to the work that we're doing in the Black Caucus, the fact that it doesn't matter what they're talking about, Black folks are impacted. And that goes back to something that Zanina was saying. And so we've made sure that we've been keeping an eye on every piece of legislation, the impact that it has on Black communities, and the different impact. Like, it's a different impact in Waterloo Region, Black community members in my area versus Black community in Toronto, or Black folks that are far north. And this has become part of our everyday conversation, which is shifting the discourse. So that's different. But I'm still shocked by the stat that you had at the very beginning of this, 14 people. So that has not changed significantly. And that's something that we have to focus on and actually put concerted effort into changing it. But that doesn't happen unless you value the voices that are at the table in every given session.
Yeah, Jill Andrew, maybe you can follow up on that with this. 14 MPPs in the last 150, whatever it is, 4 years almost since Canada became a country. I mean, that's shockingly few. Do you have any theories as to why there have been so few Black MPPs at Queen's Park?
I will say this, Steve. If legislation does not speak to the lives of the people it's supposed to support, people grow very wary of trusting politicians. They grow very wary of the democratic process. So what we need to see in Ontario government is legislation that actually speaks to and cares about and hopes to better the lives of those who have been most marginalized from participating. And, our Black communities, Indigenous communities, racialized communities, we have had a historical, lack of participation. Not because we do not want to participate, but I would argue because we do not see a place for ourselves in politics. We have to be very, very careful with regards to legislation and its impact it has on Black lives. For instance, as you know, here in Ontario, we have a premier who is not supportive of paid sick days and has refused our calls as NDP for paid sick days at every turn. That piece of legislation, refusing that piece of legislation, is a manifestation of Black racism, of anti-Black racism. Because when we look at the stats and we see who the essential workers are, we see who is dying of COVID-19, we see the areas in our communities that are most impacted, it is overwhelmingly racialized. Overwhelmingly, we see Black people there. So what does it say about progress when we have a premier who refuses to support Black lives in this very tangible way in 2021 when we're dealing with an unprecedented pandemic? So how do we get more Black people? How do we get more racialized people into politics? By allowing them to see that there's a space there for them, that politicians actually care, and that they don't just care 6 months before the election,
I hear what you're saying. On the other hand, we have no Tories on this panel who might refute what you just said. So let me just, play devil's advocate here and say, I'm sure the Conservatives just do not interpret what you said. They look at the same facts you just advanced, and they do not interpret it the same way. They may have their other reasons for not wanting to put sick days in, but certainly racism would not be one of the explanations they would give. Do you accept that?
No.
No, I don't. No, I don't. Absolutely not. What I accept is we have a government that has routinely erased and ignored the voices and the expertise that Black members of our community, frontline health care workers, doctors, medical experts have shared over and over again about what needs to be done to support our communities during this pandemic, and that's cost lives. So now it's time to do what's right. It's time to listen to our communities, and that means listening to Black people.
All right, well, let's try this then. Zanina Akande, I think I remember this well enough that the legislative session when you got elected was 1990 to 95, and you left in 94, which meant you left a year before you had to, which meant there was something going down that you weren't happy with. So my question is, if you had to recommend to perhaps members of the Black communities around Ontario right now whether to or whether not to get into public life based on your own experience, where you left early, would you recommend they do it?
I would recommend that some do it. I would recommend that those who feel that they have the persuasive abilities, the skills to talk to their colleagues and to encourage their interest in areas of not only racism but also concerns about poverty, which also puts us into the picture. I would suggest that those people go into politics. I would suggest, though, that the others be supportive, be vocal, be consistent, demand outside. I remember when we were in government and I was determined to have this employment equity passed, and some of my colleagues were not happy, I tell you, when we brought it to the floor, because they thought that would be the basis of their losing the next election, although there were many other things. But I remember thinking to myself and saying to my people outside, to Blacks outside, you want this legislation, open your mouths and continue to say so. Phone your representatives. Make sure that anytime you have an opportunity to talk about it, talk about why you need it, because we need both groups. And the reason I left is that is tied very much to what Jill is saying, but differently. I was, accused of overcharging for my duplex, a rent review. Rent review is a cases usually come up. You wait maybe 3-4 months is a long time. I waited 2 years. 2 years. I finally went and said, if I'm going to stand in the House and ask when this is going to be brought to the fore. And all that time, it was dangled out in the public. I had a daughter at high school and 2 other children in universities and in law school. And I said, my husband has died. I am not going to allow these people to dangle out the ways in which we make our money so that my children feel as conspicuous and lesser than. And so I told the Premier at that time that I was going as soon as we got employment equity so that I could be certain that my children walked with their heads in the air and not with a question that was left for 2 years. So just before I left, guess what? They decided that I had not overcharged. They put that on page 52 while they put the accusation on page 1. That's why I left.
I'm sad to say you're not the first person that's happened to, and you won't be the last. That is a shame.
Yeah, that's true.
Alvin Curling, let me get back to that original question. Would you recommend public life for people in the Black communities around this province, given your own experience with it?
I would recommend it, but I'd also say don't tie yourself into party politics, because the issues get lost. Because if you get party politics, Blacks should be involved with the issues, regardless of NDP, Conservative, or Liberals. Because when they tie themselves into it, and Zadina expressed it very well, all of a sudden their policies itself overrule the interests of what Black people want. And therefore you say, well, the party doesn't need this. And I always see a party as a club. If you don't follow the rules, that's it. So therefore, I would say to Black people, you have a strong responsibility in which to join up whatever party you do and advance the issues that you want, and don't lose track of that. So therefore, we have a full responsibility on the Black community itself to get involved, and not only to be elected, but to be a part of the political process.
Understood. Laura
May I just make one comment, though?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I noticed that, and maybe not by accident, maybe by, I don't know what it is, that all 4 people who are on this panel today are from the academic institutions. I was at Seneca and all the others. That. And they're Black. Therefore, it's telling you something there that area would need to be addressed fully. And I don't know, we could maybe look into that one of these days. Why is it so that these people are all academics?
That is a fascinating observation. I had not realized that. Well, let me give the last word here to Laura May Lindo. And I guess we should note that you and Jill Andrew have both decided to run again in the 2022 election. So I ask you to address the same question. Do you feel, based on the nearly 3 years that you've had at Queen's Park already, do you feel this is a place where Black voices are heard and respected and have a place?
It has to be. like it can't be a question as to whether or not we have a space there. This is literally the space that creates legislation that tells us what is valued and which social systems are going to support us if things happen like a pandemic. It's the place that determines how we are going to live the best quality lives ever. So we have to have a place. We have to demand that place. We have to take that space. But I think that the question does remind me of something that Uncle Alvin had said to me when I was trying to decide who I was going to run for. So I had a couple different people asking me. I had made a decision that I was going to run. I went over to Uncle Alvin's house. I said to him that the NDP had given me a very clear, like, please run for us kind of ask. And I wanted him to still love me because he is liberal and he is my uncle. And so I went and I had a sit down with him, and I will never forget what he said. He said, remember that every single political party wants the best Ontario that they can build, but they have different tools to get there. So choose your tools. And so I took that back and thought to myself, well, I like the way that the NDP talks very openly, very clearly, very definitively about addressing anti-Black racism, that they are willing to use an intersectional lens when they're talking about housing or when they're talking about older adults or when they're talking about employment and education. And that's where I'm rooted. That's where my academic life has been. And so those are the tools that allow me to do work to make sure that all of our communities are better. And so for me, that's why that party was chosen. But it does circle back to the idea that we need to make sure that Black people that are focused on supporting Black communities are in every party because of the nature of our system, because we have to be at the table. And I think we need to demand that space.
I want to thank you for coming onto TVO tonight and sharing your views so candidly with us. Alvin Curling and Zanina Akonde from back in the day, two pioneers to be sure, and Laura May Lindo and Jill Andrew, who are trying to do pioneering of their own kind today. And, you know, it's kind of funny. I know back in the day, I used to call him Minister Alvin, or I'd call him Speaker Alvin, or I'd call him Ambassador Alvin. I never called him Uncle Alvin. Maybe I should try that going forward. Anyway, thank you, you four. This was a joy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.